And we are now into our main event, Being a Human Worker in 2030. And with this, I'm super excited to introduce four wonderful panelists, although I haven't seen one of them yet. Where is Art? I think we are missing one panelist who might get here during the conversation. But please give a round of applause for Nancy Giordano, William Hurley, and Minnie Callan. And then if Art Markman walks in, everybody give a big round of applause for him walking when he walks in.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for that. Yeah, I'll take that. Actually, we're gonna just throw. Juan, can we throw the next slide or two up? Because I was gonna do. Yeah. Yeah, so I was gonna say, just for context, first of all, I'm super excited to be joining this with you all. Thank you for making the effort to be here live. And thanks for those who are joining online. I think it's always helpful to understand who is here and why potentially we have something to offer to this topic. But before I do that, I was just do a quick little context, because part of what I do is go around the world helping people better prepare for the future. At the heart, I'm a strategist. I'm really, really focused on helping people feel better in the know about where things are going, not just strategically where we are now, but that we're keeping our eye on where things are going. And as we all know, it's happening really fast. So this is Jay's conversation about the human work and the skills of the future. I'll just contextualize that by saying we are in early days, right? So you can call it 1% or however many percent, but whatever we say here, it is very early, it is very emergent. And so this is a point of view as opposed to like a stock recommendation that we know exactly where it's going. These are the things that we hope to cover, which are what are the key drivers of this change, what are the implications of the skills and jobs of the future, and our suggestions / recommendations, hopefully. But here's mine. Take a deep breath. Yeah, thank you. Perfect, thank you. So I'll start with a recommendation, which is take a deep breath. Very, very sincerely, right? All the neuroscience shows that when we do that, we're able to take in new information. I have literally been practicing the 4-4-6 breath quite frequently lately as things are changing and as the news keeps coming on my phone all day long. So I would suggest you do the same. And here are 3 stats that help paint the picture a little bit about where the environment in which this conversation is taking place. So 48% of those that were surveyed in 8 countries found that they're already dealing with burnout. You've got half the working population technically dealing already with burnouts, and we start talking about reskilling and upskilling and change. It's challenging to do it with that mindset. We talk a lot about AI and how that's going to change work, but it's interesting that workers see the value of AI, but don't trust their organizations to ensure positive outcomes. So we can be big, huge champions of this, but recognize that there will still potentially be resistance inside an organization, both consciously and unconsciously or subconsciously, because they're not quite sure that it's going in the right direction, right? So how do we champion something that we believe many companies that are built for the future are generating shareholder returns of 3 times greater than the S&P 1200? I guess it depends on the day of what S&P looks like. But this is the thing, right? So you've got people who are burnt out, they're nervous, but this is theoretically the direction the business is headed. Last week I was in Palo Alto with a friend of mine who just wrote this book, Employment is Dead. Does that mean all jobs are dead? No. Really, what she's advocating for is traditional employment is dead. And she and I are going to be working on some op-eds that are really about how we move from a jobs orientation to a work orientation, both paid and unpaid. And what does that look like? And then I'll just say that I'll leave it there. So with that, I will have a couple other things I might punctuate, but I'm excited to introduce Minnie and Worley, and they will introduce themselves. So you guys want to tell us who y'all are? Just move in. I'll leave it here so that if he comes, we'll just yank it up so it doesn't look so empty.
Okay, I think it's working now. It's working, right? Yeah, great. Thank you. Super. Chairs have been moved. So I'm Minnie Callan, and I'm sure there are a lot of other hats I'll wear when we get into the conversation, and I'm hoping for a feisty one. But I have two particular perspectives and sort of backgrounds that I think that I can offer, because this is definitely a conversation that that all of us not only have opinions on, but there's also a lot that is not known. And so to some extent, we're all spitballing, which is fine. But the two perspectives that I bring, more tangible perspectives, are one, that I'm a neuroscientist. I'm a systems, behavioral, cognitive neuroscientist by background, and which means I have thought about, amongst people who think about the role of the brain in creating us as humans, in creating intelligence, and different kinds of intelligences. And so I bring that perspective to this conversation about what is going to disappear as AI advances and what might remain and even get accentuated. So that's one. The second is very practical, which is over the last 5 or 6 years, I have been in my lab, I've been running trials on a very simple intervention for human health. And that intervention is a very human intervention. We do clinical trials like you do with drugs, but we do them on human connection. And over the last 5 years now, the second trial just ended in December, we look at the impact on human beings of people talking to people, which sounds super fluffy, I realize. But as a result, we designed our trials and we publish our papers in JAMA, which is the top medical journal, which would be accepted by others in the medical field, because we know that what we are saying sounds wacky. You have conversations in, and then we measure biology. We look at, for example, blood sugar. And so conversations in, biology out. And so in that world, so we've done that work, and I am now, as of last year, just a few months ago, we've kicked off, we started a company to scale that service and have it paid for by healthcare. That's very hard. We're not going to talk about it, but the reason I bring it up is that on a day-to-day basis, the bet that we have made for our company is that there is something uniquely human that creates these biological results, these biological effects. As part of it, we hire and identify a very particular human talent. We're giving them jobs. So I think about this morning, noon, and night. Are we creating jobs that then are just temporary and will disappear because they will be AI'd out? Or is there something very particularly unique that we are seeking and able to support and shine that will remain? And so that's a second perspective that I bring that hopefully can shed some light on this question. So with that, over to, now is
Thank
it
you.
Hurley or Bill?
Right, so
or-
I'll just, I mean, I know almost everybody here, so.
but
yeah,
is
for
it
those-
Bill or Hurley?
It's Whirly.
Whirly,
Will,
Whirly. I'm so
I
sorry.
didn't make it there, but I, from a perspective standpoint, there's a great video online. If I was asked in November 23 to come to Vatican City and talk about this exact topic, specifically around AI. Now, I have been, I don't want to say an AI hater, but I've been like, come on, like, you know, Mark Zuckerberg says we had to shut down the AIs because they made up their own language and we didn't understand it. It was like, look, just because you programming is shit, don't, you know, come on. I mean, that doesn't mean it's intelligent. But I've been, well, I'd like to maybe call an AI realist. But we are on the precipice of some tremendous change. And so I work in the field of quantum computing and advanced computing. And today, I started using a computer that uses actual human neurons embedded in silicon, which, you know, now that actually does creep me out a little bit. um, but in the talk, I talked about, you know, we are historically extremely bad at predicting the path of technology, right? Electricity was going to light every town on fire. You know, you can go through hundreds of examples. And I talked about that. And the Terminator thing, that's not realistic. Why would an AI kill you all with nuclear weapons? It would just poison the water supply for 50 years and you'd die out peacefully and it would have the whole planet to itself, right? Like, that's not how things work. The problem is not,
Noted.
you know, those kind of very, you know, just unbelievable dystopian things. It's another dystopian vision, which is it's going to displace a lot of people. And there will be people who have it and people who don't. And when we were in Abu Dhabi, well, I guess we were in Dubai, and then I went back and we were in Abu Dhabi. We were at a conference where the king of the UAE said, you know, there's going to be the countries that are quantum and AI countries, and then everyone else, right? And that's very true, but not just there. That's true on a societal level. Like, there'll be people within your friend group that will have it or they won't, and people that, you know, will be very displaced by this. So have become increasingly concerned not about killer robots or any of these other effects, but about us and our use of the technology and the use of displacement of people. So kind of, my perspective, there's a great video on the Vatican YouTube channel, which I know you guys were like, what? They have a YouTube channel? And it's about science? But it's the Pontifical Academy of Science channel. And I think, that's the kind of view I come from. And I think we're already seeing that. Today, you were talking about work a minute ago. Today, there was a company that I advise that laid off 20% of its people. And the way they did it was they did a survey to find out what AI tools you used in your job. And everybody who didn't use an AI tool was put on the hit list.
Wow.
And displaced from a job. So, developers, we've already lost a couple million jobs worldwide for software development, right? So like, it's not something that's the future, it's happening right now, but people aren't quite paying attention to it. And the systematic effect is that if you're a developer and you lose your job, you got to find a job. So where do you go? You go for whatever job you can. So are you taking the Uber driver's job? No, Waymo's doing that, right? They launched it in Austin today, right? So there's going to be this waterfall effect of really smart, intelligent people who also need to make a living, who are going to take more and more opportunities.
Which is the opposite
lower
of what like
levels.
Byron Reese, right? I've always said Byron Reese is another Austinian who's written a lot about this kind of thing, and Byron has always advocated that or suggested that it's going to go the other way because now I'll be augmented and I'll have these superpowers, so I can be a Uber driver that now can become whatever, a teacher, right? Or a teacher that becomes an engineer that becomes a whoever.
There's only one problem with his thought: economics, right? Is like the Uber driver won't be able to afford all those bionic implants to do that.
Well, the hope is that they become more and more, I don't know if you necessarily even need bionic implants, right? But that they will become more and more, these things will become more accessible to people because they were made by robots or they're online or there is a way that we can try to get to them. There's a whole argument for the fact that things become more democratized and more accessible because they will become cheaper and easier to distribute. So
there's a paradox about it. It's true.
Right.
The problem is that works when you read like Dan Pink's Whole New Mind, and it's like toilet plungers. There was one, and now there's 40 versions and all of that. It doesn't work when you have something that fundamentally changes an ability that is competitive, because unfortunately we're competitive by nature. And so like you and I would let everybody in the room, we'd be like, hey, take this, do all these things.
Again,
I don't think everybody would.
We're going to let Minnie in this conversation because you and I could do this. So this is going to feel a bit more like a podcast than a panel. I have been given permission/agreements to jump into this, not just as a moderator, but as a participant. One of the conversations around this idea is that, again, as things become cheaper and easier for people to get, as a point actually just...
Jervin's paradox.
Yeah, well, I've also got Peter Diamandis, so scarcity, right, versus abundance. So this idea that we are at, this war with one another when we think that there are scarce resources or scarce opportunities, we can feel differently about that if we feel like it's very abundant. And there's an opportunity for all of us to have our needs met because I can 3D print a house with our friends here at Icon for $10,000 or $5,000 and everyone gets a house. So those are just the kinds of things that we can think about as we jump in. This is the range of the conversation. Can we just step back for 1 second and say, what are the big drivers of change, right? What are the big things that are changing? Certainly it is technology and the advance of technology, from AI to quantum to robotics to all of it. I don't know if you can go to the slide, Juan, that I had up before. The World Economic Forum just put out their report just a few weeks ago in January, and they talked about 3 drivers. So part of it was technological transformation. The other was about economic things we're going to be shifting and changing. We'll talk a little bit about economics tonight. And the other is the green transition. So part of it is, what are the economies that are now opening up, or jobs that didn't exist that now are made accessible? I'm going to humble brag for a moment and say my son is in the space industry here with Firefly in Austin, and they just landed a lander on the moon on Saturday night. Right? Yeah. I was just going to say, I just want to know, he's been wanting to do that since he was 2. Like, this is a job he dreamed of since literally he was 2. And now he's there and his name's going to be on a plaque on the moon forever. So these things didn't exist, and the privatization of that didn't exist. So there are new jobs that are going to be created, I think, as well. So I guess the question is, do we think that are the real giant drivers of change that we need to be paying attention to? So,
I think the drivers, so again, there's stuff that we can be pretty confident about, and then there's a lot of stuff that we're going to be watching unfold. And I think that some of the near-term drivers of change are really obvious. So a plus and minus. So the negative is, so I'm not an armchair technologist, but I've dabbled in technology enough that I've worked in tech companies in the 2000s and when I was in the Bay Area. And I'm a scientist that needs to program for data. So I've had that kind of dabbling in technology. Now I'm starting a company that is human first, but if it's human first, it's definitely got a lot of technology and AI opportunity that we're really leaning into. I can tell you already that I need our technical team to perform in a very, very different way. And I have uncovered talents that I had that I've not used for a long time. I've been able to deploy those talents in ways that make certain parts of even my engineering team redundant. Right? And so if that's happening with me at that level, I know it is happening with others. And so we are not just watching it. We've made a conscious decision. I want to know what I can do with one engineer, with two engineers. That's it, or and really, really try to manage that. So that's my small company that's growing. But like that, there are more. So I went and I wanted to just get a sense of how people organize information about work type. So I asked Perplexity, like you do, and starting to just look at like what are the different kinds of work. We know what these are, but I wanted to get a full sweep of them, right? Like service-oriented roles and manufacturing, like you're building things with your hands. Anyway, and there are certain expertise-related roles. I have to say that when I look at 5 years ahead, Jay did say 2030, which is different from 2035, and it's different from, I don't know, 2080 or 2050. Every one of those roles had a chunk of it that was going to be scraped away. So I don't know it wasn't that those jobs were going to disappear entirely, but functionality under those roles was going to be not unnecessary. And so it made me think about what was left. And I'll just leave us with sort of the one thing that I've been looking at is bookstores, which apparently, which I've been trying to dig into this and actually push on this. So bookstores are apparently making a comeback.
Yeah.
Barnes and Noble invested a lot. The independent booksellers have been sort of increasing. Now, the reason I'm thinking about that is there was sort of the time of the book in the bookstore, and there's no technology. And then there's sort of the mass scale bookstores when Barnes and Noble was really like you couldn't tell one from the other. And then it was digitized. And now it's sort of come back and they're trying different ways of creating a different kind of an experience with bookstores. There's something in there in my mind about sort of the innards of many jobs being scraped away that can be automated, but there's some aspects of it that might remain. So I thought, and I'll leave with this, but I thought of a call center, which is close to some of the business that we do. So most call centers are really designed for tactical things, right? Step one, step two, step three, figure out, go down one path, debug something with somebody. All of that debugging, the logic part, it's going to go. You do not need a human, then you have a human for it. But I was thinking, what if I was going to create a call center product in 5 years from now? I think I'd create one still with humans. I don't know whether I'd need the same number of humans, but my humans would do something completely different, right? I would say hello as a human, and then I would say, okay, let me hand you over. The AI is going to walk you through what you need, and that's going to hopefully be much more efficient than when the human was doing it. And then I'm going to give it back to the human to say, how are you feeling about this? Did you feel like your problem was solved? But that little bit of like, when I go through a healthcare bot, when I go through a healthcare human who's functioning, unfortunately, in our healthcare system, like asking me to fill out the same forms over and over again, the end result of that often, 50% of the time, is that I'm deeply frustrated. So if the bot had done it and then I went back to a human and the human actually asked me, how are you feeling? I would say, I'm really frustrated because of, blah, 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 blah. The human could have a human conversation, I'd leave. And I think that would be a competitive call center product. So these are some of the, I mean, I'm being partially facetious, but the point is that this is where my head's been going in terms of what is definitely disappearing and what's left behind on the table for us.
Thank you. It's funny, I took an MIT AI course many years ago when I joined Kung Fu AI, actually. I was one of the very early advisors / strategists in helping just cheer on Kung Fu AI. And the project that I did during that course was a call center and how we could use AI in more human ways, right? So the same kind of thing. We always go back to the way that we could fix that. But I think the thing that I would add to that list, then you and I talked about a little bit about well-being, or the sense of really returning to feeling like a well taken care of human, right? Because I think when we talk about all these things, they seem so external. I think the reality is, again, we are not just workers, we are humans in this space. And I think work that becomes more humane, work that takes better care of us. Again, Deborah's thesis in the book is that we'll end up with 2-day-a-week jobs, because we won't need that much. I've had arguments with people about call centers. It's not that you need less people, they need to work less hours, right? So how do you change the math on that sort of thing? Anything else you want to add?
No, I mean, I think that this is a dangerous line of thinking, and the reason is that
I'm gonna
is
get the
is
cooler
is
part.
that as we advance. So I used to have a career debugging CD-ROMs, right? And that was replaced. Okay, obviously technology advanced. I've had maybe 16 of the jobs I've done in the last 30, 40 years be replaced as technology progressed. Here's the problem. New jobs are always created by the stuff, but fewer new jobs are created. And so you have a population that is
skilled
you
ones.
have a population that is growing, and you have an completely foreseeable, unforgiving change, which is that as things are eliminated, there's not as many new jobs, and there is an upskill. Software developers, for example, by 2030, if you're a software developer, you're not going to be doing software development. There'll be developers who get paid a lot that know all the agents and stuff, and then there'll be a bunch of agents.
But we knew that 9 years ago, and we didn't prepare for that. We
That's
started
right.
seeing
But we
this
didn't
happening.
prepare for any of this. I mean, lawyers, do you know how much money I've saved as a startup on lawyers using an AI lawyer? Like,
Yeah.
it's incredible. And it's great, because what do? They're going to run a trademark. They're going to take the form and copy it, and they'll be like, ooh,
Right.
it took 2 hours, right? What about writing? A good friend of mine sent me a 2-page proposal for a book on Friday night. And he said, I really want you to write this book with me. And I said, I hate writing books. I hate the entire process. So I spent 2 hours building an agent that wrote a 396-page book. There's no plagiarism in it. It passes through all the engines, does everything. And is it great? No. But now the ghostwriter, he was going to pay $100,000 to write his book. He's going to pay somebody $10,000 to edit it. So the new jobs go down. The amount of monetary gain you get from doing those jobs goes down. This is all leading to a gap between where we'll be and like the Gene Roddenberry future of there's universal basic income or whatever, right? Like we're not, it's not quite aligned.
Yes. I'm going to add to this list, though, interesting that you just brought up, though, it's also changing demographics, right? In the Western world, we've got a much older and older and older population. So we will need different kinds of tasks done for us, or whether it's robots that come in and help us. So that opens up a whole other thing. Like a big driver of change, I think, is the fact that in the Western world, we're getting increasingly old and birth rate continues to go down, versus in Africa, the continent of Africa and other places there, it's very, very young, and they're going to be looking at the future and trying to figure out what their place is in it, right? And what will they create as part of this, with a really different mindset around what work means and how this fits into culture. So I just throw that out there as another way of thinking about work, right? So I guess the question, are we talking about jobs, or are we talking about work of the future? Because I make a distinction between those two things.
I think there's a big distinction, but I don't use work. I would say jobs and purpose.
So, and I say the difference between future of working, which is jobs, and the future of work, which is paid and unpaid, the thing that I do to add value on the planet.
Purpose that you, and
right?
that's why I like to call it purpose, to distinguish it a little more than work and jobs.
Or livelihood.
Right?
And
livelihood,
and
something
purpose.
like that.
But even livelihood, I feel that you get paid. Like this whole idea about unpaid work is a really, really important part of the equation that's going to happen in the future. Because again, I will say I've got 5 roles on the planet, 2 of which are paid, right? And all that other stuff was both purpose driven. It was to express who I am on the planet. It's to add value to the thing that I thought was missing. It's to somehow have a creative outlet. It's for whatever reason, I go do those things. And we don't have an economy. So we're going to talk a lot about the fact that the missing piece in all this is our economic structure. But Jay will be frustrated with us if we don't talk a little bit more about skills that get us from here to there.
He looks frustrated already.
So here I'm going to ask here's some provocations to add to us. This is, we're taking Mark Art's place since he's not here. There was an amazing woman who was the chancellor of the community college system in California. She also worked for the Institute for the Future, Von Quindemelin, I was mess up her name. And she did a commencement address. And at the end, she asked the recent graduates these questions. So when we think about the future of work, what if, it's up there. First, again, we talked about automation, right? Everything, to Worley's point, is rote and repetitive in your profession is automated and done by a machine or your synthetic twin. We even talked about the fact that there might just be a version of me that shows up doing the work, right? What if technology platforms and their algorithms become the new middle management and assign and match work, and you no longer have any of that layer, which we already are seeing very, very clearly happening, right? There's no need for that. And I remember meeting a woman who was like in that kind of director level thing. She's like, but if I don't tell people what to do, what will my value be? And I'm like, oh my God, there's a long list of things I can offer to you. But that we've been trained that way, right? That's what we think we do. What if in the credentials world, like we're thinking again about that work of education, you identify yourself through personalized learning records not tied to any education institution or employer. So it's really about having a demonstrated pattern of curiosity and learning versus having a specific degree in something. I think it's different again if you're in medicine or you're in engineering or something. But I do think for the most of us, we're going to have lifelong learning, and we're going to have this record that shows that we continuously learn and can learn and are willing to learn. And the last around sustainability. Environmental stressors become so pronounced, the carbon emission or whatever the metric is of the moment is strictly enforced, which means that we're not getting on planes and we're not driving to our office, and we're thinking about how much ChatGPT we use because it has a tremendous amount of energy associated with it. And we start to think about these tools differently in our work. Do you agree with the future of working, that these are some of the things we should be thinking about?
Things we should be thinking about? Absolutely. Again, that,
they're too near term. You think that we've already
I think
surpassed all these
I
things?
think they're very near term.
Okay.
I think these are things you and I talked about when we first met how many years ago?
I know. I know. But I mean, we haven't addressed any of them yet.
Right. And we're
Society,
already
that's the
going past
frustration.
them. I think that's the concern is if you look at societal structure and you look at regulatory infrastructure and governments and the geopolitics, which is the thing that I encouraged the World Economic Forum to include in that report, was the geopolitical impacts of things. Because like Africa has great potential if everyone else lets it, right? Which is unfortunate to say, but very true, real thing. These things are not advancing at the same pace as the technologies that they're trying to govern or manage or integrate into society. And so, I've spoken to a bunch of senators and world leaders around the world, and they're like, we're going to regulate the AI. Have this. It's too late.
Right.
Like you should have thought about that 10 years ago.
Yes,
And
which, by the way, many of us said 10 years
10 years ago,
I should just say
we
it.
were talking to the same
Yeah.
people saying
Yeah.
you should start thinking about frameworks of how regulatory process advances faster and blah, blah, blah. And,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I mean, I think these were great 5 to 10 years ago. Today, I mean, they're worthless. Like I don't think people are understanding the pace of change. 2 years ago, no developer was scared of losing their job. This year, 680,000, I think already. It's March 5th.
But this is, I think, again, why we are on
Fourth.
this panel right now, because I remember 9 years ago being introduced to low code, no code development by a company here in Austin. I forget it was called Convergence or something like that. I forgot what it was called. And I'm like, wait a second here. No, none of my children are going to be getting comp sci degrees at this moment, or at least programming degrees. Like, there's no way.
Well, yeah, and the inflection point is now. I mean, as I said, if I can do something, then it's really at a point where it's at scale. That's I mean, that's seriously, it's my level. So let me just say that I think these are great ideas. Automation is going to happen. These are great ideas about like continual learning, and I love it all, but it feels I agree with you. It feels a bit theoretical. What I do know, I would agree with you, Worley. I keep thinking Bill, and if you remind myself Worley, I love that. I agree with you that I think there are things that I'm pretty confident about. And the one thing I'm pretty confident about is this big discrepancy between the haves and the have-nots being amplified. And I mean, there are many ways in which that's true of our world today. But specifically, as I was looking at all those different worker types, when I'd asked Perplexity, there is a physical level of engagement with the world, which definitely, we're talking 5 years from now, right? The engagement of AI and robotics, and I mean, it's not like it's not happening, but that is further away. So there's physical things that are happening where I can see people are still plucking oranges. I can still see that. Maybe it's improving a little bit, but there's going to be a world where, and they're going to be even, maybe they're already lowly paid, maybe even worse, where it's really, humans are still doing the last remnants of the physical interaction with our physical world, because we have not gotten there yet. While the people that can have, really be the high level complexity dancers, right, who are going to have jobs because the bots are going to do the coding, and then you need the person, on top who can make some connections. And so all I saw was this real gap between this sort of few high level conceptual and the on the ground frontline physical still. And that to me is just an exacerbation of where we're at today. And I don't trust I don't trust our world to see that and to protect it. To your point, we're already late. So I think the question is, well, I actually, honestly, on that one, I don't know where to go, and I would love anyone's thoughts on it, just because I've not seen the world be proactive in the ways we do need the world to be. So I don't have an example, and maybe others do, but I do think that there is opportunity to look at skills that are left on the table today that maybe have a time to shine and that may gain economic value. And that's, you and I were talking about this before, and that's where we think about emotional intelligence, our inner lives, and what we need. And in the end, we are still here. So we need things as human beings. And who is giving us that? To some extent, AI, but I don't know. I think there's opportunity there.
The number of therapists is going to grow exponentially
We're all
because no
gonna-
one's going to want to talk to the robot about the therapy, about how they don't like the robots, right? So everyone will be a
But will they be
therapist.
real? Will they be human therapists or will they be
Sure,
AI
sure.
therapists?
There's human
ChatGPT
something.
and I have already had lots and lots of deep conversations about
There's
my
human
partner.
something. I don't
do
need
not
a
doubt
human
that at
therapist.
all.
Right.
I just need some insight. Just saying.
By the way, the conversational bots are terrific around, that are they're discrete conversations. They're really not bad
Right.
at all. But the issue is not that, right? And so this comes back to what we want as human beings. So in this world where we are around, what do we still need that maybe other humans can give us? So bots are really good at mimicking, but in the end, trust and our sense that we're talking to a human being, that is important. There's something there, I think. And by the way, this is where we're going into a space where I don't know, I honestly, and I don't think anyone knows. I cannot predict how much of my need for human connection can be substituted for by sophisticated bots. I don't know the answer to that.
And this is the number one biggest problem I have, because that is based on age and perspective. And my 9 and 7-year-old, since they were 3, like when Julian was 5, he was like, "Oh, I was talking to Google earlier, and Google said blah blah blah," just like it's a person. Every morning they come in, they say, "Hey Google, what's the weather and what's this and
Sure.
do this and do that." So I totally agree.
But do they still
I
want
think
you at the bedside reading out a story?
they literally, Lincoln has his iPad reading the
Doesn't
story,
want you
right?
by the bed anymore.
He doesn't want me by the bed anymore. Now I'm good for football, throwing the ball. I'm good for
Until the robot comes over.
getting punched or whatever. There's a lot of things, but the thing I think is, this is such a complex system we're talking about. You can't just think about the technology advancing and the regulatory things not being fast enough and the economic impacts, all this. You have to also think about the perspective of age, of their
Amen.
generations being raised with, this is just normal that you ask the machine this or that. It's not a machine in the way we see it, right? So when you look at all of it, there's hundreds of variables, affecting millions and hundreds of millions of other variables that will determine where this future goes. And I think the one that scares me the most is, people are lazy. Unfortunately, a lot of parents are lazy, right? And while I try to use this to educate my kids, I see the effect of people who just be like, "This is a new babysitter, like an iPad."
Oh, for sure.
And then
There's
it
that.
completely changes everything that we're talking about.
But I will go back to, I've always said that the issue is not the technology, it's the way that technology is incentivized to be
Exactly,
used,
exactly.
right? So if it's taught to teach a child something and to really engage with the child and to be more passive and let the child's imagination lean in, right? All the things we always say about passive toy, active child, that kind of thing, as opposed to trying to get more advertising revenue so that I can get more engagement, so I can get more whatever, right? Then I think that goes the wrong direction. So I always say it's less the tool. So it's not even lazy parents, it's really greedy companies that are not using the technologies in ways that I think can hold us all
But
better.
that's just another one of those variables that are all lining up into a potentially very scary future.
Or I will sit there and say, so I'll just throw another scenario out there, because when you and I were talking about this, we were saying that there's a level of understanding, connection, consciousness that also opens up, but I'm not worried about sweeping the floor, or I'm not worried about picking the oranges, or I'm not worried about where I'm going to get my next meal, or if my house is paid for or whatever. Like, what does it open up? So I participated a few weekends ago in a workshop online with an astrofuturist named Ingrid LeFleur, who I love, on the future of time. And we did a really interesting thought experiment around certain narratives in the Afrofuturism community. One of them had to do with napping and dreaming. And we imagined what dreaming would like in 2050. So it wasn't 2030, but it was 2050. And all of us, and I actually spent then some time recently with one of the premier, I guess, expert dream people who also had this conversation about the role that dreams play in our lives. And so we imagined that there would be a place that you would go collectively to dream, and that your dreaming would actually be more important than potentially even your consciousness, because in your dreams, you have all kinds of imagination, you have all kinds of ways of connecting. Another woman added to the piece that there would be plants that would be there, and we'd be actually having to have this conduit between us and the plants. The plants would be the thing that would connect us to one another and share our dreams across space and time. And that we actually then ended up with ChatGPT really quickly throwing in a prompt and like drawing out a sketch of it. And it's a really phenomenally gorgeous place to go be. Right? And that you're actually valuing a different kind of humanness or intelligence or connection than we would have even made possible, right? If 100 years ago, I said to somebody as they were walking down the street that Broadway theater was going to be turned into an Anthropology or to an Apple store, which is what it is in downtown LA, they'd be like, what? Right? And here we are now. If I tell you now, 100 years from now, that this is actually going to be a dreamscape thing that has got, connective and quantum intelligence with the plants, right? Possible?
I mean, William Gibson wrote about it, right?
What?
Technology advances. Everybody is in a little pod at home where they pump drugs into you, and you do that all day, right? There's several sci-fi novels about
something
that.
cool about the fact that
It-
we
it
as
is-
humans changed,
it-
not just that we're trying to be the same kinds of humans in the same kind of
That's
world.
why Ray Kurzweil and everybody says you're going to change into, you're going to be the machine, right?
Right. Well, I'm going to have these little,
right,
robots that help me become
There's
more.
all kind of
right.
features. I think that the thing that's important is, I think this is all about awareness and education, and there is not enough attention on that for any generational level.
Right. All right. So let's
for
talk to
anybody,
your
because
ideal, like, how are you educating your kids? Your younger ones.
participatory. I'm letting them have that freedom, like you said. It's kind of active child, active thing. I have given them access to things like ChatGPT and Claude and stuff like that. My 9-year-old is taking coding school, not because I think coding will be important to his future, but because he's using Claude to code a Roblox game, right? And so he'll have a little bit more understanding. I think I said this about 20 years ago. I got slammed for a presentation I gave that said, what you should be teaching your kids is how to find out all of the things that are going to be, like a ChatGPT, where you're like, I know how to get the answer, right? I know how to say the thing to get the right information out. It's like, turns out that's going to become extremely, extremely important. My wife, Pam, who just started a startup, and if she'd have started that 2 years ago, she'd be coming to me every day, being like, how do I do this? How do I do that? And she'd just go on ChatGPT. She hasn't asked me hardly any questions.
I know.
She's completely independent.
We used to have a phrase that was a production company here in town. Forget that. When we were doing TEDx Austin stuff, and it was GTS, Google that shit. And now it's
Yeah,
a whole
exactly,
different way of
exactly.
being able to get there.
But I don't know how you do that. That's what worries me, is that there's not enough people saying, we don't know how to do that. We should all be getting together and having this conversation and all of these points and counterpoints around this, right? It is the greatest time to be alive in the history of our species, but it's also going to be the biggest disenfranchising potentially ever if we don't start addressing these issues. And I'm afraid that people don't care enough about their fellow man and everybody else as in mass to be having those
I know.
conversations.
So, and again, I get to hang out in a circle where we really, really do, right? And I talk
like
a lot
you are.
about the rise
Like,
of,
but that
no,
is
but also the rise of the feminine
that's
and
a
this whole
fraction of a
conversation.
fraction of a fraction. of a
I'm going to say
fraction
there's
of the
more out there than you
population.
think that there are, and I'm working every day to increase that number and the potency of those people, so they believe that it is possible.
Respectfully, because we're both in this group. We're going to dinner Sunday to this. We are actually very good friends. but I argue because when I get my talk in Abu Dhabi, I use science as thing. 2040, 8 billion people on the planet, less than 0.1% remotely involved in science. That's including administrators, everyone.
Okay, this is the point I want to get to in a second. So I'm just
That's what I
making, one of the part of it is, I think, again, increasing our understanding of the distinctions when we talk about work. So I just use it quickly, then get in the future of working versus the future of work and the work of the future, which is patterning away from extractive systems to create prosperity for all, right? Like that, I do believe, is the work of the future. And I don't think it should just be a small percentage of us that do it. I think it should be more. But there's something that you said in the Dubai, Worley gave the keynote at the Dubai Futures Forum in 2023, and I've actually swiped a little excerpt of yours, and I take it and put it in my talks around the world without giving you any credit or portion of my speaking
I'm perfectly fine with that.
But I do give you full attribution But it's that snippet, and I almost brought it today, but I figured we had you live. I don't need to show a video. But let's talk about the citizen scientist of the future and how old that person will be.
Yeah, I mean that's part of that whole age thing is, my company's purpose is to lower the barriers to these technologies like quantum computing, AI, and everything. And I envision a world where a 13-year-old girl wins a Nobel Prize with no scientific knowledge or anything because they had a problem and curiosity and they asked questions and they ended up with this peer programmer that is this infrastructure that'll just kind of be, I don't think it'll be sitting at an iPad or whatever. I think it'll be ambient compute, right? And I'll just like ask the house or whatever, and they'll solve these massive problems. And we prepared a demo that we were going to give, but it was frowned upon. Where I took a young child who had lost their turtle in the freeze when we had all the power go out a few years ago, and they asked why. Why did the power go out? Why? And through this process, over the course of a week, they re-architected the Texas electrical grid and ERCOT
Yeah, I
and connected
love
it. It needed to be next and everything. That's the future. Like children aren't the future. Like, oh, our children are the future. Children are going to start, and this is where the job things worries me, because now you're going to have a 7, 8, 9-year-old, 10, 11, 13-year-old that can do what, 5 years ago, a PhD, 40-year-old with, 20 years of experience did.
Because you said something very clear in that talk, and it's one that I think that we really underestimate, that there's an imagination crisis right now in the
Absolutely.
world, that we have literally can't imagine what a world could look like that doesn't look exactly like the one that we're in now, but with a little augmentation. And I think that's where kids have
And
the
we're
big
very
gift, right?
uncomfortable doing it. We have a lot of groups that would gladly give up their worldly possessions and share with everybody. I don't think, what scares me is I don't think that most people would do. I think people are very comfortable with their station in life. And what we're talking about is everybody's going to have to go down just a little bit for everybody to come up.
That's more of an energy transition issue than it
Correct.
is anything else, which I think is going to hit us one way or another. And there's
Yep.
a great, I shouldn't say great, but a really provocative influencer named Sage Lanier, who's like 25 years old out of Stanford, right? We'll talk about the fact that if we don't change our economic system to be able to address this, we're not going to have a world, period. So it just depends. And there are plenty of people who say that. So the question is whether or not that's going to hit first, or whether or not this AI transition thing is going to hit first, or whether there's going to be geopolitical craziness that might be discussed tonight online. So when we talk about this distinction again about where these various peoples are, like what is it that we think that people need to fully orient differently around? For you, it's around paying more attention to the human connection side of it that we knew historically probably when we were in smaller communities, but that we're now reorienting to. Is that one of the big shifts that you were imagining gets us through here?
I don't know if humans are going to do it. I'm specifically focused on trying to create scenarios where we can have that human connection because it delivers better health outcomes, which I'm going to get insurance to pay for. So it's an economic. So for me, there's like a path for impact, a specific kind of impact, and a turning of dollars to that solution. If successful, when? It's healthcare. So I'll say, if successful, it envisions paying people for being the best version of a human that they can be. That's why I'm excited about what I'm doing. So it's a company, but it's actually about trying to turn some of the economics to actually fund and support human talents, because I've shown that they impact health outcomes. So in that,
So I'm just going to say she's getting insurance companies to pay for the thing that we want to scale really quickly. I think she's the genius in figuring out how to
I'm working
redeploy.
on it. Some success, but early days. The healthcare system notoriously does not pay for anything that matters, really.
Or that has positive outcomes.
So this is
quickly,
not right. So this
Yeah.
is not an easy problem to solve. But the reason I say that is, so I mean, there are a lot of abstract questions to address here. At this stage in my life, I've worked with large institutions and abstract issues. I have really come back to being small in, hopefully not in the scope of the idea, but in action. Because I come back to, this is the time, and I agree with you, this is the time to be curious, deeply, deeply curious, and be perfectly okay with saying, I don't know, because it is a time of I don't know. But it's not a terrible thing to say, because there are specific things you do know. But I think I'm on a journey of curiosity. I've wrapped it into the company that we're working within the context of that. But it's a curiosity about, what do we need as humans? Because I can see so much that we think we need kind of disappearing. So if that disappears, what do we really need? Because in the end, I will still have a child, I will have a partner, I will have a parent, I will have a friend. I think I'm going to still want to go to Remedy and sit around people I know, not just random people, but Jay and somebody else he brings, and have a drink and chat. I think that is not going to disappear. And then there's more and more and more, but that's what I'm trying to build. I'm trying to think about, like, what am I really going to want? And then also, what do we need that we're not getting enough of? And so the reason why, our intervention works is because people are not feeling seen. Now, whether how much that's going to be taken over by AI or not, we will see, but I would like to be there to ask those questions so that we can control how it develops.
Then I just want the conversation at Remedy to be focused on what goes at the center of a drawing that I haven't done yet. So imagine there's a question mark in the center. There are four big things that to me are the drivers. Again, it's AI and advanced technology, it's climate and the pressure it's putting on that, it's shifting demographics, and it's increasing consciousness, right? I really do think that we are expanding the potential to become more and more aware of our connection to each other, our connection to nature, our connection across time and space. Like, I think there's just a big, huge opening happening there. Those four things are redefining every single industry. So put every industry from manufacturing, medicine, education, finance, retail, just go through the whole list, right? And then the outside ring of that, it then makes us think through all kinds of concepts like time, identity, marriage, love, age. Like, all of those constructs are going to be completely rethought. So as much as we say that there's going to be a certain kind of even nuclear family, I'm not even sure if that's going to be the same, right? I think we're going to look very, very differently as how we look. So the question for me is, what goes at the center of that drives all of that, or that informs all of that, or that all that is oriented around? For me, it's shared prosperity. I really do believe that there is that is going to be a possible thing to accomplish in our lifetime, Worley, is that we will be the advocates for a shared world in which all those things, as they shift and change, are oriented toward being a healthier, better species than only winner takes all. I know that you are concerned. And so I'm going to go, before you go there. So this is the World Economic Forum's, their big, which you and I will disagree with the very first one. They think 170 million jobs are going to be created, 92 are going to be lost, and 78 million are going to be gained. I do not believe that. Right. So we think that there's going to be.
I don't either.
So I think one of the things is, as you read these reports, whether it's McKinsey, whether it's Deloitte, whether it's, the World Economic Forum or LinkedIn or Indeed, all of them are coming out. And I will tell you, everyone at South by last year told you that AI will not take your job. And I think all of them were not right.
But the flaw in the report, just to point it out for everybody, is that these reports are written by organizations who make their money building economic opportunities for countries. And the only way they think of economic opportunities are, we're going to create economies of scale that produce jobs in your country or your city or your whatever.
Right.
It's an obviously skewed number, because the whole point is, like, how do we create those 170 million jobs? No worries. I just happen to have a consulting program to help you with that.
But that brings, so I think this is, now we talk about geopolitical. So yes, to all of what you said, but I think I am right now talking from a very American perspective and very first world perspective. Just coming back from India, I don't know I'm fascinated when I think about how a country like India, where basically when you have a coffee machine, you have the boy standing next to it that will take your money, put it in the coffee machine and take it out and then hand it to you, because labor is massive and has been so cheap. I don't know what a country like India is going to do in the face of the loss of jobs. I think that is fascinating to think about what's going to happen in India, and what's going to happen. And India is very different from what's going to happen in China, and this because the scales of those populations are so great. So I think that's another unknown, but it will be different.
And one of the biggest employers in India, right, is Tata, across all of the Tata companies.
Company, maybe as a single company, yeah.
Well, as a giant org, they have 125 companies, or they're across every industry from steel to auto to whatever. And the chairman of that is very, very thoughtful and concerned about that as well, and really thinking through that. So the good news is that there are people in these places that are sharing our humanistic.
Yeah, but they cannot have jobs disappear. I mean, that
well, again, this
will be like,
but this goes back to the economic
different
issue.
kind of chaos.
Because you don't have an economic structure that's able to distribute goods and services in more in more provocative ways. We're relying on a very, very old model for that distribution. And that's, I think, the opportunity that we have moving forward. I will go back to, because Jay will kill me if I don't say something more practical about some of these things, right? They will talk about the tech skills are around AI, data, and security, cybersecurity, very specifically. And this goes back to the answer you gave my son Zane at the AI conference many years ago when he asked you as a student, what should I be learning? And you said improv, right? Or Shakespeare, or any of the
Something creative, anything creative, music, improv, anything that has you think in a different way, because all the hard-coded skills are going to go away.
It was, and for me, I took away from that so that you learn to talk to a computer or work with the computer, not even talk to, but work with more symbiotically with the computer in a more, again, evocative way, right? You bring that sense of imagination, you bring that sense of talking differently to or with the machine, right? Any other thing you want to add about how important it is that we?
Yeah, I mean, all of this just bugs me so much.
I know, but that's why I think it's important
like security, like cybersecurity, you mentioned, like you realize by 2035, it's highly likely app stores don't exist.
Right.
Because you'll talk to your device, you'll tell it what you need to do and what you need to achieve. The software will be written in that real time moment. It'll deploy and execute, and then it'll get deleted, right? So everything we know about security models and data security and all the things that the Economic Forum does are, just like you said, old thinking. Same way we have old world thinking. It's like it's like 19.
So how can we go in there and navigate
thinking.
that? Or is there, or I think this
I mean, we're Strangeworks is on the quantum economies workforce, so we're trying.
I know.
But they were like, what's an app look like?
But this is where I think that many of those institutions that were designed during the industrial era, for whatever that global coordination was, are going to become less and less relevant. And we're going to have to figure out what the next thing is that we're
100%.
building around that. And I'm, again, part of what it is that I do is spend a lot of time in these gatherings and pulling people together to have these conversations to figure out how we tunnel under these existing systems, and that there's more and more opportunity to create alternatives to those things that aren't going to look like big, huge behemoths that are run by a very monocultural version of a white man from Europe. And we're going to be able to think through these things really differently.
You make Klaus sound so evil.
I'm just saying in general, right? I've been reading, I've been spending a lot of quality time with you in Quantum Computing for Dummies, my friend. As I've been thinking about the talk that I'm going to be giving at South by next Thursday on the quantum leap and how we can repattern the future with a feminine perspective, right? And I'm looking at that picture from 1927 or whatever of the, only, except for Marie Curie, is the only one who got to show up at the party of all the men. So anyway, there's an opportunity to shift through and think about all these things differently. So I just say, take these pieces of information with a grain of salt and really look much more expansively at who would you read? If you're going to give somebody examples of who to read? I have been reading Ray Kurzweil's Singularity is Near. It's kind of interesting and provocative.
Yeah, but somebody did that in the 1920s and he kind of like revamped it. I think so. Understanding the abundance scarcity stuff, even though it's an old book, Dan Peek, Whole New Mind would be a decent book. I think a really great book is Kill Chain by Christian Bose, which is about kill chains being how data is gathered, decisions are made and executed on from a military standpoint. It talks about the US and China and the difference in the geopolitical systems, which I think carries through to everything that we're talking about today. I think that's a really, really informative one. I think that one book I always recommend to everybody, none of you will buy it or read it, is The Mythical Man Month, which is Man Month, which is probably the greatest technology tome ever. Have you read it? It was written the year I was born in 1971. You can buy 100 copies on Amazon tonight. That should say something about its longevity. But it's 54 years old, and it talks about some of the things that I think people are going to really need to think about as far as how we're looking at these, because it's going to be turned on its head in the next 10 years. It's been the thing that has guided my whole career, and now I see its end. And it's don't read, go write, go have a conversation with somebody, go publish your own. You can do anything today. Good Lord, go to Replit. You can build your entire company in like an hour, and it costs. We helped somebody do this last week. We helped a woman build a company, our whole website and everything. There are hundreds of entrepreneurs that are solo entrepreneurs that all have more than $1 million in revenue in the last 18
And what are they selling? Because I think that's a key thing too, right?
All
It's less
manner
about
of
the
things.
jobs. It's more around, again, entrepreneurship.
all manner of things. And so anything around entrepreneurial would be the number one thing I would go try to read. Also, it's written by entrepreneurs, so I wouldn't believe half of that bullshit. But you'll
What
get some good. I said it's written by entrepreneurs, so I wouldn't
right,
believe half of it. But but like things are creative things that are going to get you to do it. It's no longer about you going somewhere and getting knowledge. It's about knowledge you create. It's about what you can share. All the stuff you're talking about, that sense of community, that sense of collaboration and working together.
Do we think influencers are going to still matter? Are we going to have?
They're already trending down. Do you know how many AI influencers are on Instagram? They're fake people that people act and interact with like they're real people.
I know.
My friend is like, "Oh my God, have you seen this woman? Like, I thought her, she's so hot," or whatever. I was like, "That's literally in the description says it's a fake person. What are you talking about, you psychopath?"
But that's an interesting thing as people are becoming more and more emotionally attached. This goes back to the neuroscience, right? To their chatbot, to their robot, to their AI model, to their whoever. There's a whole nother
I got a
conversation.
really nice hammer I like, but I'm not in love with it.
Yeah, I mean, I really am attached to my robo vacuum cleaner. We've given it a name, and there's something about it that you feel connected. It still is never going to replace what I have with my kids or my husband or conversation around a dinner table, etc. But yeah, I mean, I think I definitely we are definitely at a time where the haves and have-nots are going to be exacerbated for the reasons that you mentioned. But in the particularly privileged place that I sit, and it is, there's like a large amount of space that I'm interested in exploring, which has opened up that I don't think was as open before. So, for example, in my company, I've always had very particular ideas about design, but I would never have implemented anything because it takes me ages. I don't know how to use tools, and it's just like it takes too much time and energy. I actually don't need anyone now. I've realized I could sit back and I can bring my design interests to life because I've just got this tool that literally, for the first time, and it wasn't true last year, it's literally happened over the last couple of months, I feel, where we've got to the place where I can build. I don't know what kind of engineering
All right,
partner I actually need
So I'm
anymore.
going to say, so in 5 years, you can do that with your digital twin, with your synthetic self.
That's
Will
a
they
different
be?
issue. That's about how I might apply it. Right now, I'm applying it to create things that, for my business. I don't fully understand like how a digital twin is going to be useful to me or not. It's a separate question. That is a question around how much will an artificial being, how will it actually make me
But a digital
enjoy
version.
different things?
What
So
you-
I want to comment on hers, but I
No,
want to
that's
come
a
back to you.
different question. I just want to say
We
it's
have
a
a
different question.
friend, somebody you met in Dubai, one of my friends, who does not go to any Zoom meeting, who has used HeyGen and a bunch of other tools, and there's a fake them in every meeting. And she has done this for 16 months,
Yeah.
and nobody has
Has-
caught on yet. And it sends her a transcription on her phone, and then she writes an email, "Great meeting, everybody," blah, blah, with ChatGPT. 16 months this person has had literally a digital twin. So I see where you're going there. and I'm shocked. And she invited me to join one of the meetings. I have to be honest. I was like on FaceTime with her, watching the Zoom, and I was like, wow, like I'm actually really, like it was really, really good. But I wanted to the thing you're talking about, which is the most exciting thing tonight to be excited about, is we live in the age of the ideas, and any idea can become good. And also this age of you can take agency over anything in your life. I had a health scare in December. I'd love to talk about your thing because I have a huge anti-medical slant now because they all go into Epic. It's like the Google for doctors. And they're like, and they're like, oh, it must be these things. And I was like, it's not those things. And I had a doctor tell me in the 1st of December, don't you wish you would have went to school to be a doctor instead of a developer? I was like, I didn't go to be a school developer. I literally, my life was at risk in December. And I said, I'm not traveling anywhere in Q1. I shut all this stuff down. And I started looking for solutions. And what did I do? I went and I took all of the stuff I could find, all the white papers and everything, and I fed them into an AI. And I said, what do I need to know? What do I need to do? And then I found services like Pronovo. So I can do my own MRI scan. I can do my own blood test through Function, 400 blood tests and everything. And I would say that like, and I got a concierge doctor in case that I check things with every once in a while. But like my participation in the medical system is like gone. like it's done. Like if I have to have a surgery, something, right? Like dentist,
So again-
super important. But this is what's kind of amazing about, you know, the positive side of where we're at.
Well, to your point, and Pronovo, if you guys haven't done it, it's a full body scan that identifies things. It's been around for 3 or 4 years. I did it 3.5 years ago or so. That's the kind of thing that's democratizing a kind of science, a kind of knowing all the stuff Mary Lou Jepsen is doing with open waters and being able to do all kinds of
But the
brain
important
scan
part,
stuff.
it's a science of self. It's your body, it's your data. And you can take all that. And what do? I take all that and I feed it back into the little.
But someone's created a
agent I wrote,
business around that is what I'm saying,
which
is
is
that they're thinking
amazing.
about us all very differently. Okay, Jay, you ready for us to go into more
We
tangible
are.
questions?
Are you going to remedy this panel?
Try and stump us.
Test,
You
test.
have
Is
two-
this on yet? Is it on the speakers? Great. Okay. Great panel. We have a lot of great questions too that will continue this conversation. Again, we can't get to all of them, but I've selected some, and I had an independent person select the winning question because I know too many of you and I didn't want to rule out everybody I know. So there's two really obvious first questions here. One is from Steve Ward. Many times in history, people have forecasted wildly futuristic changes that don't come to pass. How do you think of these AI predictions in light of that phenomenon?
I mean, that's what I was talking. I couldn't agree more. Go watch my talk in the Vatican. The whole first part of it is man, we really suck at making technology predictions. And so no matter what we think, even all the stuff I'm saying, I'm not looking though at predictions as much as I'm looking at pathways of what I'm seeing based on data, right?
We talk about
So
trajectories.
big difference on trajectory and a prediction. So when I say those things, I'm talking about a trajectory, not a prediction, because there is demonstrable proof we suck at every technology prediction, from CEO of IBM thinking they'd need 4 computers in the world to, you know, electricity burning up towns to whatever. I wouldn't listen to
I think that
any
we've-
AI predictions.
Yeah, I guess what I think is that we haven't necessarily sucked at what the technology would be, but we've sucked at what the implications of that technology would be.
Correct.
And a lot of it comes through science fiction storytelling or like worst case scenarios. So I did a panel at South by several years ago on how science fiction impacts our view of the future with 2 really amazing screenwriters. And I did the whole survey of it. And it's like 95% of what you watch is super dystopian. And a friend of mine who writes about protopian futures, Monica Bilstica, will say that it's just a product roadmap for the Machiavellian. And what we haven't created is enough really protopian storytelling, not just utopian, but protopian, in which we are pro-social and we can imagine a future that gets us there. So I think what I'd love is not, again, that we can't imagine the breakthrough, but how do we tell better stories about what those breakthroughs could mean for us?
Minnie, you want to address this one?
I'm a digital
You're like,
human.
All right.
you're like my new favorite person.
So the first question was, we suck at making predictions, so why should we listen to anything here? And I want to echo what Worley said. It's not a prediction, it's a trend. And it's a trend that's actually happening right now. And that is a very different thing. I'd also counter that question by saying, we also suck at predicting how much things will change sometimes, like the internet, mobile phones, the World Wide Web, social media platforms.
The need
So-
for, again, like AI ethics and framing and all that stuff years ago, to think about climate and energy use and all those things. There's plenty of things that we have said that everyone has not paid attention to, right? It has been super, super frustrating.
So Wyatt Callahan asked a question, and you all addressed it over the previous hour. Now I'm going to ask you for your 60-second answer each. What is the best thing that we as humans can do to proactively ensure our value in the economy as AI continues to develop? This is the 60-second answer version. Clock starting.
Minnie?
I will start with being like extremely curious. Like, I mean, everything you can possibly do around. We've talked about curiosity for a long time, but now I'm going to amp it up to imagination. Brian Grazer wrote a book a few years ago about curiosity. He's a movie producer with Ron Howard. Their films have grossed $13-14 billion. He has taken someone outside of his industry to lunch every 2 weeks for 22 years. Right? That's a commitment to curiosity, to learning, to thinking differently, to having conversations with people like us, debating. Like, I don't even call it question and answer. I always call it question and conversation now, because I don't think you should believe an answer or a person who has it, but be really engaged in the conversation. So the second part would be then build a network of people that you can learn with and from. Austin Forum is part of the reason I love it so much here, but I think it's about reaching out and taking time to build those relationships and ensure that you're surrounded by people who can give you some really good feedback.
60 seconds, Minnie.
I don't know. I think firstly, there are 2 lenses. One is, for myself, it is about this really intense curiosity and really digging into.
Can you hold the
um,
microphone just a little bit
Sorry,
closer?
yeah, really digging into what is left if everything is done by machines, and that's my personal curiosity. But I'm more interested in the world and my contribution to it. So with that lens, I mean, what I can hope is at some point, if we are freed of the nitty gritty of things to be done, maybe we have more time and space for empathy. This is a hope. This is not what I would say 99% is going to happen, but I can hope that that opens up space for empathy, looking at thinking about, by the way, and the one thing we do know will for sure happen is this haves and have nots. So the impact of this rapid change, even though we don't know the nature of the change, is quite clear in my mind. And I think we have seen it over and over and over again in times of other times of rapid change. So I don't know, that's my radical hope, is that it creates enough space and time for us to have the interest in and the skills to then think about life from others' perspectives, and therefore have a different relationship with influencing the world around us.
Optimists live 15 to 20%
Stop, you
longer.
used your 60
No, I
seconds.
was going to say optimists live 15 to 20% longer. So I think that there's get back to science-based reason to be optimistic and hopeful.
Really?
The robots won't care if you're optimistic or pessimistic. I'm just kidding. That was a joke. That was a joke. I'm just
My robot will.
teasing, I'm
My robot's
teasing.
going to care.
No, look, it's simple. I'm going to launch a new organization this year. I was talking to my friends about it earlier, because diversity, equity, inclusion is, companies are killing it and all this stuff, and everybody's all upset. And I'm like, guys, I'm not as worried about that anymore. I'm worried about human inclusion and advancement. Like just the fact that, like we're all in that one thing. And so the thing that I'm encouraging everybody to do is, I thought yours was perfectly put. The only thing I would add is embrace all of this stuff that you can as early and as often as you can.
Exactly.
Right?
Like play with
Be
it.
involved in the development of it. Be involved in the usage of it, the developing of the market of it. Like I have so many subscriptions. My wife, if she knew, would murder me. But a new tool came out earlier today. I had it that second. They're like, early adopter list. Absolutely. It's one of maybe 160 or 70 tools that we have access to with the innovation team at Strangeworks, and we're using it all, and we're involved in all.
And you're able to do that because you're not sitting down writing a book keystroke by keystroke, and you have more time and attention to be able to do that.
I have optimized. Last year I traveled 400,000 miles. I drove myself into the ground, as Jay knows. I was never available for something like this for you. Hardly. I do. And I have increased my availability to focus on the things I want to. Maybe what took 100% of my time last year is taking 18% of my time this year, like actual trace, like trackable. And yeah, and we should
All right, I'm
all
going to
be
cut
doing
you
that.
off there to move to the next
I'm just
question.
saying we should all be doing that. Go ahead.
All right, so next question I'm going to ask is, how can we help the everyday worker stay resilient through all this change? How can we as a society ensure that we don't exacerbate the inequality further?
That's a very quick answer, which is we need to change. I mean, the whole system is not, the system has to be different.
Close to your mouth.
We can't have the economic system that we have today and expect what you just talked about. We just can't. There's just no way. So the answer is to change the economic system, which is, wow, not a small thing. It requires more than just a panel, but it'll require people to I mean, it's a very different kind of work. I did, I know, but this one's the easiest question to answer.
Yeah, for me, I again, there's a big bridge, right? But when we talk about resilience, it's also recognizing there's systemic. It's not just individually that I have to become more resilient, but we have to be inside resilient systems that are actually caring for us. So this idea about moving to a shorter work week, I think is absolutely, like, we can have this whole return to office, tug of war forever, but it's going to split between the companies and the organizations that really do care about their talent and people who feel a sense of self-worth that are choosing those who care for them versus those who don't. And those who don't are going to keep driving people to the ground. You're going to have higher and higher healthcare costs. I was saying to Minnie, I think we're going to have all kinds of issues around heart attacks and cancer for those who aren't able to be in systems that are holding people well. And I think the other ones are going to do a really, really great job of changing the whole flow and culture and allow people to feel inside systems that hold them. That includes also government and economic countries that hold people well and countries that don't.
All right. Craig Wheeler asks, I think you are underestimating the exponential advance of embodied mobile humanoid AI to displace humans in a wide variety of human enterprises. And if you want to comment on,
I
you
guarantee
commented
you,
a lot on AI.
I guarantee you, I am not. That is a huge, huge issue. Absolutely not. I have already ordered my figure one robotics kit. I've ordered a bunch of this stuff. Like 100%, the embodiment of that is going to be massively changed. And when I started Strangeworks, I had three options for where I was going to go next: biohacking, quantum computing, or robotics. And I didn't go into robotics because the economics of it at the time, and that is dramatically shifting. And those robot companies before 2030 will have their ChatGPT moment. And Figure and several of the others have already announced they'll have robots for sale in homes, cost about 25 grand on the high end, about 11 grand on the low end in the next 24 months. And so 100%, I am not discounting that at all.
Any women asking questions? Just curious.
What's that?
Just curious if any women have asked questions. We have a lot of very curious men.
Yeah, I've asked. The previous one was.
Oh, I didn't hear it. Okay, cool. Elizabeth. Good. Yay. Well, because we always dominate by, I'm just curious. Sure.
Either you want to comment on the robotics
Yeah,
displacing yet
I
other
think
jobs?
He's got it. I think that it again goes back to in my scenario, the robots are part of our. They are designed with our values, and they're designed to be part of our lives. My robot and my children are cooking dinner together, and delivering it to drones to people who couldn't get out that night. Like I think of it as a good thing, not a scary thing.
Great.
I don't know enough about it. I still feel like the things I see today are not that far from Akira, whoever I saw in Japan like 15, 20 years ago.
Such a woman who fell in love
I'll
with her
show you some
Roomba.
videos.
Not
Yeah,
my Roomba. There's
Yeah,
there's a very
I was
specific.
gonna say,
Yeah.
listen, Roomba lover. No,
Yeah, exactly. I think we've
I
already.
got some videos you need to see after this. At Remedy, did we say it enough times?
Yeah, I actually embedded that into the summary of this event because and Craig, I'm glad you asked about that, because it is really clear that some of these humanoid robots are going to be able to do some of the very repetitive assembly line kind of tasks that humans are doing, not in 2030. I agree with Worley, in 2027. I mean, this is really almost here.
Well, it's become affordable enough for organizations to bring them in. I think they've been able to do some of this stuff
Yeah.
too, right? But the cost was really high and the whole infrastructure. I think what you're saying is the cost is coming way down.
I mean, a fully loaded MacBook. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a fully loaded MacBook, 7 grand. One of the robots is 11 grand. That's not a huge difference between I type on this and this thing does the yard and the cooking with the kid.
By the way, don't forget that these autonomous cars that we've for years have been thinking, oh, it's not close. It's not close. You try your full self-driving your Tesla and it doesn't work quite right. You think it's not close. Worley and I went in, he took me in a Waymo the other day, and I texted my friend after the ride who drives for Lyft, and I said, dude, you need a new hobby because this thing's as good or better than you are now.
But I mean,
So-
autonomous trucking is literally trucking or truck driver is like the #1 job in a significant number of states across the country. And we're going to have autonomous trucking. So the big question, I'm just going to throw this in real quickly, that Worley and I talk a lot about. He who holds the algorithm for that truck is going to be an extraordinarily wealthy person, and it is disproportionately he's. And that disproportionate wealth is going to be creating the big, huge issue that we have as we move forward, right? We're seeing it already playing out now, and the influence that people have because they've become, gazillionaire, and then we'll have a trillionaire, we'll have a company of one that's a billion in revenue company. So the question really becomes, how do we structure those things differently?
And I'm just gonna
Those incentives.
disagree with you on that one point, which I know is an inflammatory point, which is the he, and I'll tell you why. Because it used to be a bunch of people like that. There weren't a lot of women in software development and all. And as many stated, now anyone can do. So that is
If
getting
they get
leveled.
funded, 98% of every
No,
VC
no.
dollar still
No,
goes to.
No, but here's the deal. But okay, let's comment on that right quick. VCs are fucking dead.
I know.
Okay. The new VC model, there are more solo and dual founder companies, as I said earlier, making millions of dollars of revenue in the last 18 months. That how would you fund that? Oh, here's 50 grand for
And
your
that's,
first.
I would love that share.
And that is changing so fast. That's the only thing where maybe I'm the pro, positive,
No.
optimistic person.
And I want that to be, I want to encourage more women to be in that space to do that. So I'm with you.
All right, we are going to go to the winning question now. is we have many, many more good questions, and I hope people will stay and talk about these. Maybe we can get a chat bot in the guise of these three that will answer all the remaining questions in the Slack or something. But the winning question is John Garcia in the room. John Garcia is not in the room. John just lost his chance. Is Emily Davis in the room? Emily, you should thank John for not being here. It was a virtual tie, but my objective person saw the other one first, but he's not here. So I saw
She
yours.
deserves it though, just because the way she was like, "Oh, poor John." I would hate for that to happen to me. If she's like,
Empathy, I
"Please,
like it.
Empathy is not dead.
Emily, I think that when you go to South by and enjoy it, you should type up notes and send them to John. That would be good. Okay, so Emily asks, what do you think of creative generalists / project-oriented floaters in the future workforce, and how will they be employed? So kind of leaning into your bit about the people who are super curious and who embrace the human skills. Do you see a market for these floaters?
I think they're the only ones that are employed because they're kind of probably going to be doing 8 or 10 or 12 things
I
to.
think the
to-
only
to be
ones
able
that
to
would be
catch
employed.
up.
Someone can't hear you.
Yeah, I think they'll be the only ones that are employed because you won't necessarily have one job. Just like you said, you have a bunch of multiple roles. And so the people that can be creative and float between all those things, and maybe they're doing something that's artistic and something that's more finance or this or that, I think they're going to be
And
hugely
we'll have like
advantaged.
tremendous flexibility. There's this quality that other people have talked about called AQ, which is adaptability quotient, right? Which is more than intelligence and more than emotional, but it's really the ability to adapt to new surroundings and new circumstances and new experiences. And those generalists are much more able to go do that kind of adaptability
The
thing. versus
future will
being-
belong to them. The people you're talking about, they will dominate the future.
So encouraging, again, liberal arts in our education and encouraging that sense of curiosity in our kids, I think is a really, really important part as opposed to teaching to a skill or to a really narrow career.
She asked, how will they be
That
employed?
depends on who you ask. I'm still going with like things aren't looking great, but but I'm going to be safe because Nancy, I will live in the commune that she builds with our mutual
Yeah,
friend
yes, and
Yarrow.
I'm trying to go to a post-work future, right? Where we will not be, we're having to be employed by somebody else to be able to have our basic needs met. So I'm working on a whole new economic vision.
I'm just glad none of you said Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. And in which those are the people who are going to be building the infrastructure for that for everybody else.
All right, let's give our panelists a round of applause.